Hey guys, this is going to be a response to a YouTuber named Capricious Blackbox. If you guys aren't subscribed to him, I would absolutely recommend that you do so if you are interested in discussions about philosophy and logic and stuff like that from the point of view of an atheist, but for the most part, he doesn't really speak about atheism. I think his channel focuses more on countering the presuppositional arguments, and recently about he made a series of videos about objective morality from the point of view of an atheist. Now, he assumes that objective morality actually does exist in a secular way, in opposed to the way religious people view objective morality as coming from God. These videos have sparked a pretty interesting discussion in the comment sections of those 3 or 4 videos. I didn't actually watch the recent one, which is the thought experiment one, but before I actually did that, I would like to talk about the previous videos and some of the points he brought up and some of the responses he had to my points, which I didn't really find reasonable or that I actually have some issues with. And this is actually the point of this video, trying to straighten out a few of the things and try to explain my point in a much clearer way than I can do in a comment section. Now, I'm going to apologize in advance if I misrepresent some of his points, because he had to actually give some clarifications throughout those videos to what he actually meant, and it gets a little bit confusing sometimes. So I'll try to portray his arguments to the best of my ability, at least the way I understood them. Now, his main argument, the one he actually requested responses to, the main point of his first video was he first of all believes that morality is either objective or can be objective. And the way he tries to demonstrate this is by bringing an example of parents raising their kids. He says, okay, if somebody who accepts that morality is subjective, somebody who accepts that morality is subjective would not raise his kids as if morality is really subjective. What he means by that is that, for instance, if you have kids and you do accept subjective morality or moral relativism, and your kid goes ahead and beats somebody up for absolutely no reason, most parents would say that what he did was wrong. But if morality is subjective, you can't really tell him that what he's doing is wrong, because it's only wrong as far as you're concerned subjectively, while you can't really tell your kid what his moral conduct or ethical codes should be if morality is in fact subjective. I mean, each and every individual would have his own set of morality, so if beating somebody up doesn't go against your kid's morality, then who are you to actually tell him that what he's doing is wrong? Because as far as your kid's concerned, what he's doing is right, or at least not wrong. Another point he raised is slavery, and that in the past, slavery was not really held to be anything wrong, but today it's pretty much a universal truth or an objective truth that slavery is wrong, and that's why we don't practice slavery anymore. And according to him, it's not likely, or at least, or even maybe impossible, that we would go back into slavery being right. So he thinks that this is some kind of indication that slavery is objectively wrong. Now, there was a point that hasn't really been discussed that I brought up, but I didn't really seem to get a good response for it. At least I didn't notice that he did. And this point was actually raised by Anti-Citizen X in his most recent video, which had nothing to do with this particular discussion. It was more like a video countering the claim of theistic objective morality, But he brought up a really good point that I think applies here just as well, and that is that even if I say that murder is universally wrong, that still doesn't make me accept objective morality. And and even if I try to force or convince other people that what they're doing is wrong, I can still do that and remain a moral relativist. And his point is that when I say that something is wrong, what I'm saying is that if we presuppose certain rules or certain criteria, then following from that, certain things are wrong. So let's take, for example, murder. Murder is wrong, and that is something that is universally accepted. Now, does that make murder objectively wrong, or does it just make it subjectively wrong if we follow the presuppositions? Well, I believe that murder is only wrong if you presuppose the value in human life. If you presuppose that other people have more value than your own self-interests. Now, clearly, I do believe those things, but that doesn't make them any less subjective. In other words, the value of human life is not something that can be quantified or objectively measured in any way, and clearly there are instances in which there is no value for human life in some particular cases. If sacrificing a human in order to save a bunch of others, for instance. So how do you weigh those things? Clearly, I don't think that me telling somebody that what he's doing is right or wrong negates morality being subjective. So when I tell somebody what you're doing is wrong, what I'm saying is we both agree on these presuppositions. So how come you are still doing what you're doing? That is basically the undertone of what I'm saying when I'm saying that somebody is wrong or right about the moral decisions that they're making. Now, a point I made about the part with children, I'll get to slavery later, but the part that I commented about his point in which if you teach your kids that something is right or wrong, then clearly there's some kind of double standard if you actually do accept that morality is subjective and each person's morality is or can be different from the rest, and that there is no actual way to determine what is right or wrong. Or in other words, that there's no objective truth value to morality. So regarding kids, I've actually brought up several points, one of them being that, first of all, you don't have to actually necessarily teach your kids right or wrong. You could just give them tools which they could use to arrive at their own conclusions of what is right and wrong. Now, I'm going to expand on that point a little bit, which I didn't do in the comment section, and I'm going to bring up an extra point. The point is that if I would actually teach my hypothetical kids what is right and wrong, what I'm doing is not really teaching them what is moral and immoral, but what I'm doing is generally just telling them these are the things that society in general deems wrong, and these are the things that society in general deems right. Whether or not they're actually right or wrong objectively doesn't really have anything to do with this. I'm just teaching my kids how to be a normal part of society and how to conform to the accepted subjective rules of the majority. Another point I brought up to his you don't raise your kids that way argument was that I believe that even forcing your kids to accept what you think subjectively is right or wrong isn't really a clear indication of you accepting that there is something intrinsically or objectively right or wrong about your beliefs. Uh, and I brought up an example of, let's say, for the sake of argument, that I don't see any moral problem with child indoctrination or even forcing them to accept every single one of uh, my codes of ethics, every single one of my moral codes, forcing them onto their kids. I still think that that is completely consistent with subjective morality. Because if I don't think that there's something wrong with indoctrinating my kids, then it doesn't really mean that I'm saying that it's generally right or wrong, but more likely that I'm telling them that I think this is right or wrong. So therefore, and I'm your parent. Therefore, you should do what I tell you. And that is still completely consistent with subjective morality or moral relativism. His counter argument to this was that he thinks this is some kind of sociopathy because the way he said it was, you think that you are the one who decides and nobody else gets to decide. And I think that he kind of misunderstood why I brought up child indoctrination rather than dictatorship, for example. If I do believe that I can indoctrinate my kids and force them to accept my moral code, then it's not as if I'm saying that my moral code is as good as an objective truth. What I'm saying is that every single parent has the right to teach their kids what they conceive to be moral and immoral, as if it's a universal truth, and it still doesn't. It still isn't inconsistent with subjective morality, and I don't even really see how this is some kind of sociopathy because, like you said yourself, most parents raise their kids as if their morality is objective, as if what they believe is true objectively. So you understand that most people think that it's perfectly fine indoctrinating your kids. And if so, like I said previously, it's still consistent with subjective morality. Now, to the point he made about slavery, that he thinks that slavery is now objectively immoral, I told him that I absolutely do not think that that is the case. And the fact that we now universally, not objectively in my opinion, but universally accept that slavery is wrong, even though I'm not really sure how much I agree with that either. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it's a universal, that there's universal agreement on that slavery is wrong. Does that mean that it's impossible or unimaginable for there to be a moral regress in the future in which slavery would in fact be okay? And I actually think that it's a good thing that he brought up this argument, because all I have to do is demonstrate that a moral regress is possible, and that would automatically negate secular objective morality. Because objective means that it has some truth factor built into it, some verifiable truth factor built into it. So all I have to do is bring up some kind of example of a moral regress that we had in some point in history, and that would invalidate objective morality. During the time during the Bronze Age, it was widely accepted and a moral responsibility to kill witches. Then, when the Greeks and Romans took over, it became wrong to kill witches because clearly things have changed and people became more enlightened in those times, and they understood that killing people for practicing what they conceive to be witchcraft is wrong. And then came the Dark Ages, and killing witches became, again, a moral responsibility of people. So, which one... Oh, and clearly after the Dark Ages ended, again, killing witches became immoral. So, I think you would argue that killing witches is objectively wrong. But how can it be objectively wrong if it was objectively right in the past? Again, objectivity has to have some kind of verifiable truth factor built into it. So you say that, so are you going to say that killing witches is wrong, and since we know that now, we're never again going to kill witches? Well, how can you say that? It happened in the past that we stopped killing witches and kept on killing them again afterwards. So I don't think that it's unimaginable that even slavery would become a trend again. I think that not only is it not unimaginable, but I think that it's even reasonable given enough time and enough societal changes to happen that slavery would become right again. I can even think of several scenarios in which slavery would be objectively right. I'm not really going to expand on those because it has to have a lot of things that we have to use for the sake of argument, and it's nothing more really than a thought experiment, so I don't really want to delve into that right now. But basically, that's my point about objective morality not being objective, but rather universal and changing. Now, I'd like to bring up another point, or at least expand on a previous one, in which I stated that morality entails presuppositions that are subjective. I'd like to use an example here. And in this argument, I'm going to actually try to demonstrate that objective morality is impossible and irrational, no matter how you look at it. Now, I'm not even saying that it's not likely for it to even exist. I'm saying that it's impossible for it to ever exist. Now, let's use this example. Let's say that somebody breaks into another person's house and steals their DVD player. And he tries to escape. The owner of the house notices this, and before the man manages to exit his property, he pulls out a gun and shoots him and kills him. What he did objectively right or objectively wrong? Is what he did objectively moral or objectively immoral? So is that even a valid question? Because, like I said previously, every moral ideology that exists has presuppositions that morality is built upon. In this case, there's a conflict between two of the presuppositions that many people agree upon, and you might even call them universal. One of the presuppositions is that human life is probably more valuable than a DVD player. So it would be immoral to kill him, or the way Capricious Black Box would say it, it would be objectively immoral to kill him. But then again, some people would consider that it would be completely moral to do so, because there's a presupposition that a person has the right to defend their own property by any means necessary, even if it entails using lethal force. And that's why it is actually legal to do so in many places. So, did the owner of the property do something immoral by trying to protect his property and his family, for instance? Even though in this case it was just at the cost of a $50 DVD player, and to save that he actually sacrificed a human life. Now, the way I see this, I would think that he did something immoral, because I actually do value human life more than a stupid fucking DVD player. And I'm also not really convinced that a person has the right to defend his property by any means necessary. I think a person has a right to defend his property up to a reasonable point, which is up to debate, obviously. So that is my subjective take on this, but you can't really derive anything objective from this. There's nothing verifiable, or there's no verifiable truth factor here, and there's nothing quantifiable where you can say, okay, what he did is right or what he did is wrong, because there's too much nuance in this. Like I said, there's a conflict of the presuppositions that that morality is built upon. So, Capricious Black Box, I would actually really like you to respond to this point, because I think that this is the most important point in this discussion, which is, is morality objective, or even can it be objective? I would contend that it cannot be objective, because every single presupposition you can ever come up with will be subjective, and if morality is based on that, then again, it follows that morality will also be subjective in 100% of the cases. Now, I don't want you to get me wrong. I think that this idea of yours of a universal code of conduct that everybody agrees upon, for instance, that killing is wrong unless X, Y, and Z, for instance. Let's say that you somehow manage to convince the entire world to agree upon a certain set of rules of conduct, and that there's absolutely no disagreement upon any topic or any kind of moral code there. Let's say that there's complete agreement among the entire population of the planet. I think that would be pretty awesome. I mean, I would absolutely love if that was the case. I agree with you that that would end pretty much all conflict, because everything can be resolved in a manner that is fair to everybody. And since everybody agrees upon these rules, then nobody can actually say that they've been treated unfairly. That I can say absolutely no problem with that. But I think that going from universally agreed upon to objectively true is too much of a leap for me to make. And like I said again, it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever how morality can be objective, especially since we're subjective creatures. I mean, we're talking about opinions here. We're talking about things like that. Opinions are based upon life experiences of people, the way they were raised, the way their parents forced them to accept things. So if it depends on context, if it depends on upbringing, if it depends on other environmental factors, if it depends on culture, it cannot possibly be objective. Have a nice day, and I'm waiting for your response if you feel inclined to do so.